Me. Um, as we continue in this chapter where Bonhoeffer focuses on the Sermon on the Mount, chapter 6 in Discipleship. So last week we ended with having finished the Beatitudes. So he had just kind of finished the Beatitudes, and we're now going on into the greater part of the rest of the chapter, chapter 5. Um, and so just before we move ahead, were there any questions, comments about any of the Bonhoeffer's discussion of the Beatitudes, or any revelations, realizations, concerns, points of clarification, anything from the preceding part of the chapter? Okay. Well, of course, as always, if there are questions or comments that come up, feel free to unmute and voice them. Um, but so, having come through the first part of chapter 5 of Matthew, Bonhoeffer spends a fair bit of time talking about how um, each of these individuals are, all of the individuals that are called, they accepted the call, i.e., the disciples, are blessed. And we kind of ended with saying that the Beatitudes apply to all disciples. It's not that, uh, some followers of Jesus are peacemakers, and some are sorrowful, some are meek, but that these are characteristics of all those who answer Jesus' call. So all the disciples are blessed by virtue of answering the call, and they're blessed in these particular ways, as Jesus enumerates in the Beatitudes. And so now Bonhoeffer moves to this kind of ending discussion of this piece, that saying that the faith community, all of these blessed people are the community of the crucified. So they're all connected. All of us are connected through the crucifixion of Jesus. Um, and that kind of paradoxical understanding of blessed are those who mourn, blessed are those who are persecuted, as in the same way, blessed is as the one who was crucified, because how he has entered and inherited eternal life. It's kind of the paradox of why we call the Friday of Holy Week Good Friday. Um, at first glance, how could this be a good day? Jesus died on this day. But our understanding is that that sacrifice um, made the way for us to be hopeful, to not have to fear or be anxious about death. That now we are connected with God in the same way that Jesus is, in the same way that the Son of God, Jesus, that was with God at the beginning, the Word of God, is connected. So now we are connected through His death, and that's the starting point, and that's where and how we are blessed. Um, and now this is the crucified one speaking these blessings, and so it's always blessing. Blessed are, blessed are, blessed are, blessed are. That's coming from, as Bonhoeffer says on the top of the 78, coming down from the cross. And even as thinking quickly on the seven last words. They were all positive words of affirmation. Woman, behold your son, son, behold your mother. This day you will be with me in paradise. It is finished is a positive statement because now everything has been accomplished. My God, why have you forsaken me? Um, as whereas not, ostensibly positive, does show the dependence that we all have on God. Even, the only begotten relies on God for safety, relies on God for connection, and that separation that death represents for humans is similar for Jesus. And even though the connection is not completely severed, it might appear to be that that's the case. We know that that's not the case because Jesus is raised from the dead, but we also know that that's not the case in point of fact and in our experience because there is still a connection with those who have gone on. But that's a little tangent there. Um, so the disciples are blessed. But even as Jesus is proclaiming that the disciples are blessed, the world rejects. Um, the world rejects those that don't look to it for their don't pay allegiance to the world or don't look to the world for the understanding of how they are to act. They are still in the world, but separated from it. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next section. Um, but the world shuns these blessed ones, shuns the disciples, because the disciples are looking at the world differently, looking at themselves differently, again, through the lens of Christ. And so the world seems different, or it is different for them as they are seeing everything through, everything is being mediated through Christ for them. And that's off-putting for a number of people. And we've probably had an experience similar where we are have dedicated or rededicated ourselves to our faith. Sometimes it might even happen during Lent. When we give up something, the people around us are like, "Well, why are you giving it up? That's silly. Why, we usually do this together. What do you mean you can't do this now? What do you mean you can't have this? Or I made this for you. Aren't you going to eat it? Well, no, I'm not." It kind of sets us apart. And whereas, our Lenten observance might be a small example, it is still an example of when we make a decision, oftentimes to follow Jesus or to be more intentional about our faith. There are those around us that don't want to see that, don't want to hear that, or are upset because we've made that choice. And so likewise, um, are in this is the same way that Jesus is speaking to disciples. It's the same experience that disciples have when they make this full commitment, and even as they're making this full commitment that is good and holy, the world is saying, away with them, similar to what the crowd said, away with him, crucify him, give us Barabbas. Um, like almost that, Jesus is too good. He reminds us of where we fall short. So now, we got to get rid of him because he's trouble. He's a problem. Um, but even in all of that, there's a blessedness. Um, and then Bonhoeffer kind of wraps up this section with that last paragraph there, that with the first sentence it said God feeds the hungry with the Lord's own supper. So, the blessed ones are hungry, they hunger and thirst for righteousness' sake. They're always wanting because they're looking for, trusting in, reliant on Jesus and on God for their sustenance, for everything that they need. And so, the only thing that's going to satisfy them fully is to receive it from Jesus. And so Bonhoeffer says that God feeds the hungry with the Lord's own supper. Wounded and martyred bodies shall be transformed, and instead of the clothing of sin and penitence, they will wear the white robe of eternal righteousness. From that eternal joy, there comes a call to the community of disciples here under the cross, the call of Jesus, blessed, blessed. so that even from the cross, even in the shadow of the cross, we are blessed because we are following Jesus. Jesus is the reason that we are assembled at the cross, and even in the horrible shame and and abuse that the cross represents, those that follow are blessed, as Jesus proclaims them to be so. Okay, so that wraps up the portion that's on specifically on the Beatitudes, and so now we go um, further into chapter 5, starting with verse 16. And I mean, you can read it there, Matthew 5:13 through 16. But now there's a shift in how the disciples are talked about or how they're described. Now we get a decidedly positive tone. That's not just the kind of ironic, you're blessed because you're separate, you're blessed when you're persecuted, you're blessed when you're rejected. But now, you are the salt of the earth, Jesus says. Um, and and there's an extended discussion about salt, so we'll get to that in a minute. But if you cease to be salty, what good are you? Jesus is saying. So hold on to your saltiness and realize that this is who you are. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid, and we don't hide the light under a bushel basket. Um, and so the works that we do, the light that we shine is attractive so that people will ask, well, why are you doing this? What are you doing? What is this for? What's your motivation? And then we have an opportunity to tell them about the presence of God in us and the call that we've answered in Jesus. Um, and so Bonhoeffer kind of points at the obvious in that next full paragraph of page 79. So far, the blessed have appeared as people worthy of the kingdom of heaven, but obviously at the same time as people unworthy of living, superfluous for this earth. So again, the rejection of the world, when a disciple dedicates himself or herself completely to following Jesus, they're shunned and pushed away and not seem to be worth living. But now Jesus ties them, these blessed ones, directly back to the earth. Um, they are the salt of the earth. They are the noblest asset, the highest value the world possesses. Without them, the earth can no longer survive. And, this is hearkening to, the great importance of salt, in the ancient world, pre-refrigeration, pre, particular kinds of cleansing rituals. All of these things, salt was an important commodity in the world, um, and not just simply commodity, but an important substance for all manner of things that needed to go on in for life in the world. And so now Jesus is saying that you are the salt of the earth. You are indispensable. The world can't survive without you. Which is again a decided shift in tone from what had happened at the Beatitudes. And again, all of this is for all disciples. It's not just for disciples with a particular gift or a particular place in society or resources or upbringing. This is for all disciples. So all disciples, Jesus has said, you are the salt of the earth. And then this is, a divine salt that is proves itself or is worth something because it's effective in what it does. It's worth its weight because of how it functions in the world. It is the earth's substance. And so now Bonhoeffer says not only is the disciple focused on heaven, but they're now reminded of their mission on earth. So, probably said in some of your hearing before, and you probably heard, heard the saying, the adage that, you're so um, heavenly bound that you're no earthly good. That, sometimes we can take hold to this, vision of going to heaven and this vision of being set apart and beloved of God and holy, such that we have separated ourselves from the reality of what's happening around us, or that we find ourselves as if we are so far beyond and so aloof that we can't imagine that we would work with or be with those people that aren't on our level, quote unquote. And it's, in some ways it's a temptation to always be, concerned about heavenly things, and forget about the real earthly things. And so in this one image, Jesus ties these heaven-bound individuals, the disciples, to the earth. You are the salt of the earth. The earth needs you to do this work. So focus on what's happening here, and don't be so enamored of or so overly focused on the world beyond. Um, and Jesus calls the disciples the salt. Uh, Jesus doesn't say that he is the salt. And so by naming the disciples the salt, um, Bonhoeffer describes that as passing along his efficacy, his effectiveness in the world. Jesus, that is, now becomes the disciples because they are salt. And and then, salt has to remain salty, um, for its own sake, to be true to what it is, but also for the sake of the world. So there's this interplay of the individual reality, but also of the the effect that the individual has on the entire community. And so in order for salt to remain salt, it has to be salty, you know, circular, but true. And and the community of disciples must remain what Christ's call has made them. And the call has made them salt. The answer to the call has made them salt. Um, and um, and so salt doesn't go bad, it doesn't decay. And so it is therefore lasting power for cleansing. Now, in the ancient world, obviously, salt was used for preservative purposes. You would salt, salt fish as we still do now, with salt meats, as it's still done in parts of the world. So it was a preservative, and then also a seasoning. You sprinkle of salt, and it helps the flavor to come out. But it's also used for purification. So, so you see it, as Bonhoeffer references, uh, in Old Testament offerings, salt is mixed with the offering. And in the Roman Catholic baptismal rite, salt is put in the child's mouth. So it's just this sense of cleansing. And even in Ezekiel 16:14, that uh, Bonhoeffer references here, this that it was a custom in the ancient world, in the ancient Jewish world in particular, of cleansing babies with salt. Um, that there is this part of salt that is not that salt not only is pure, but it's a purifying agent. And so, you have the preservative agent, you have this the seasoning agent, but you also have the purification piece, that is of great importance, both symbolically and in reality. Similarly, when holy water is made, salt is blessed and then sprinkled in the water, as a cleansing agent, as a purifying agent. And so So that, so salt is of vital importance. And but then again, if salt loses saltiness, what's it good for? And so understanding that you are salt, as Jesus says, Bonhoeffer goes on to say, it's not that you should be salt, but you are salt. This is a declarative statement, a description of disciples, and Jesus wants to make sure that they understand it. Yes, yes, Mr. Brandon.
Two things.
Mm-hmm.
About the statement about Roman Catholics using salt on
Mm-hmm.
the tongue of the baby at baptism. That was also done in the Anglican Church in the Caribbean.
Okay.
Now, my question though is about Bonhoeffer using the disciples as a metaphor for salt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and he says if you can't lose your saltiness. Can a disciple, maybe through some great sin that has not been asked for forgiveness or given for or forgiven, lose his saltiness? Because I'm comparing the saltiness with the devotion to Christ.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So if, for example, let's use Judas when he betrayed Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he lost his saltiness because of what he did, betraying
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ. Could he ever? Well, we know he killed himself, but could he ever forgive himself, get forgiveness for what he did?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think well, Bonhoeffer would say that similar to Jesus, once salt has lost its saltiness, it can be made salty again.
Right.
Um, But Bonhoeffer is tying the salt metaphor, the salt description, to answering the call. And so the only way that you really lose your saltiness is if you don't follow the call. So either you refuse or you stop following Jesus. I think uh, I think Bonhoeffer would say that's different than from sin.
Mm.
Um, and I don't, that's a good question. For Bonhoeffer, he might, um, he might say that, that Judas is completely lost and can't come back. Um, can't retain the saltiness. There are others, ancient theologians and contemporary would say yes, somebody like Judas could come back. I think, but in the way Bonhoeffer is writing and describing the saltiness, um, or being salt, not even the saltiness, but being salt. I think he might say that, yeah, that Judas or Judas like people who would do something like Judas is a fundamental betrayal and rejection of the call. Therefore, you've missed it or you've messed up. And because he even says later on here on this page, I think that we're on, that once the window to salvation is open, but you only get one chance. Um,
Mm.
and if you don't, then you're out. Uh, yes. Uh-huh.
So
What about those?
go ahead,
Go
Ms.
ahead.
Curtis.
Go, Miss Curtis.
No, no, go ahead. No.
No, go ahead, Miss Curtis.
What about those earthly beings who are stripped?
Say a little more.
We may have a priest who is finally deflocked, as we will say,
Okay.
quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
where I'm going here.
Understood. Okay, I got you now. Yeah, I mean, I think, on one level, that's, there's the institutional question of,
Hmm.
is that person worthy of being a priest anymore because of what they've done? Um, but then when you're talking about kind of cosmically salvation wise, there is still that piece of the possibility of repentance and renewal. Now, will you be restored to that same position? I don't think that's necessarily the case. But you're not utterly cast out, and into outer darkness and never to return again.
Okay.
Um, yeah. Excuse
Some might still a bit not sure as to the saltiness of a person.
me.
What is Bonhoeffer is saying is that when you get a call, you have the salt. Not necessarily once you accept the call or you answer the call.
Hmm.
Now, if you get a call and you don't answer it, then you already have the salt because you got the call. I mean, that's what I'm understanding. Maybe I'm wrong from through Bonhoeffer.
Hmm.
So that once you get that call, you have the salt. But if you do not respond to the call, then you lose that saltiness.
Well, Bonhoeffer says that Jesus says you are salt, and he's talking to the people that he's already called blessed because they are the disciples that have answered the call. Are you salt prior to? I think Bonhoeffer would say no. I think that the declaration that you are salt is predicated on your answering the call.
Your response. Okay.
Yeah, right,
I
right. Yep.
got it.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Um, and Bonhoeffer says, "Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Wilson."
No, on page 80, the last paragraph, it seems that Bonhoeffer is saying that once you have lost the saltiness, you're lost completely.
Yeah.
But if you're a sinner, we're all sinners, or we sin in some form. I mean, if we cannot repent or cannot be saved, what's the point?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I chalk this up in Bonhoeffer's writing to the fact that he's trying. I mean, he's really pushing a very, very strong demarcation between good and evil, and he's really pushing his readers here, his students there, and and the church in general in Germany, to make a very stark choice, because and for him, and I think for many probably in that society at the time, this was good versus evil. This wasn't, there wasn't any nuance here. There wasn't any, oh, well, he's not so bad. This was, this man is a madman. He is not only plunged our country into war, he's not only trying to take over our neighbors, but he's murdering people. He's rounding people up. This can't be. And so Bonhoeffer's coming at it with this is this is the moment of decision. You have to make a decision. If you don't, what good are you? Now, and I think, and if you've read any other theologian that's writing in kind of a dire time like this, this is kind of the tone that they take. I don't really, I wonder, and I haven't read enough of his letters, or haven't read them recently enough to know, or to remember if he kind of deals with this as, okay, now I've made my decision. I got caught. I wasn't successful. Now I'm in jail to be executed. I don't know if there was any softening of that position, but yeah, but here he's very clear. He's like, you don't answer the call. You stop following Jesus. Well, that was your one chance. Sorry.
Well, he
Um,
stopped. He lost his saltiness at some point. Bonhoeffer.
it would seem, it would seem that, I mean, yeah.
If you're because he himself wanted to murder someone,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and he was saying before his earlier writings, he was against that.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, so you can make the case, and I'm sure, and well, critics of Bonhoeffer have. That, well, wait a minute, okay. You said all of this before, and then you had this change of heart, this decision, whatever, to now go and be part of a plot to assassinate a person, albeit it's Hitler, but still a person, to kill them. How do you reconcile that? And a good point of his letters is kind of trying to reconcile that. This kind of discussion of, well, this is where I was at the time, this is how I felt at the time, and now I've made a decision that that doesn't seem to be. You can't really square it with where I was before. So how do I navigate that? And I don't know, he never really comes to a conclusion. But again, I think for Bonhoeffer, as for many people that have written, theologians that are writing in time of war or, in dire persecution, it's, there is no, it's kind of like, how Paul writes when he is assured, that he's positive that Jesus can come at any moment. He said, don't worry about this other stuff. Don't worry about, what kind of food you eat, or don't worry about, what day you worship on, or don't worry about being married, or don't worry about these things because it doesn't matter because this is the most important thing that Jesus is coming again. And so Bonhoeffer is like, all of this other stuff, going around and around, you have to make a decision on which side you're on, and it has to be complete because if it's not complete, again, this is Bonhoeffer and discipleship here, then you are not going to be able to do what is necessary to follow Jesus and then combat this evil. And so, most of us haven't been in this kind of a situation where the evil was so stark, and the people around us, um, you know, seem to be okay and comfortable with making some sort of peace with this. I mean, we could say that our current state is similar, but I don't know if it's quite as dire yet. Hopefully, it doesn't get there. But in any case, that the stakes were so high, for Bonhoeffer and others that that there wasn't any gray area. They didn't want there to be any gray area. They wanted to make sure that the people that they were writing to, that they were teaching, that were listening to them, had an understanding that this is the most important thing that you can do right now because this evil is so great, it threatens to consume everything that we know. Um, and if you can imagine what it's like to be in that kind of a situation, you can see how somebody can write. And German theologians often do this. If you read, Bonhoeffer, you read Moltmann, you read Bultmann, you read these Germans because of their history, and then this is where culture comes in. Because of their history, they've had these really dire situations that are happening, or at least how they viewed them historically. And so the way that they write, I mean, it's really powerful, but some of them are really, really very, very hard line, and you don't have a choice. Or if you make the wrong choice, that's it. You're lost. And because to a certain extent, making the wrong choice meant that evil was going to win ultimately, like again, like consume all of German society, consume all of Europe, exterminate Jews and other undesirables under the Nazi regime. And so that's the kind of backdrop uh, to what he's writing, and so that's why he, I think, makes these really, really hard and fast and very, very stark statements. Yes, Miss Curtis.
But in his period, they were far younger than we were experiencing what they experienced.
Yeah, that's a good
So we
point,
we
right?
would understand the change in his mind from time to time.
Yeah, 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 you're right. That's a very good point. Thank you. It's a very good point. Yep, yep, yep. Extremely good point. Yeah. So to your point, Ms. Curtis, some of this is youthful exuberance. A lot of us were probably there were things in our lives where we were we were dead set on, and it was this way or no other way. And you live a little bit and you have some experiences, and you're like, okay, well, maybe it's not quite exactly that. I don't have to be that staunch. Now, some things we might have gotten more focused on or rigid on, but a lot of times, some of the things that really consumed us in our younger years kind of begin to fade a bit as life goes on and more
Yeah.
experiences.
It,
Yes.
it also would be interesting to see his writing when he shifted
Hmm.
from this way of thinking to being jailed or
Hmm.
imprisoned. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. 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 And even there's another book that was written kind of, I mean, it was a little bit after this, I think. I'll have to look it up and make sure but Life Together, that was talked about, how a community that's committed to Jesus in this way, kind of the practical reality of what that kind of a community would look like. Um, and was it prayer book of the Bible and Life Together? You often find in volumes joined together, and it was. And the way he talks about that now, again, he's talking about those that have already committed. There's a much more of a say softer or less harsh discussion. Again, it's this book is really trying to set out, okay, you need to make a decision, and if you decide to follow Jesus, that's going to put you at odds with what the world says. That's going to put you at odds with the Nazi regime. That's going to put you at odds with the Third Reich. And so you have to be prepared for that. But focusing on Jesus will keep you from getting off kilter or, kind of like Peter walking on the water. You know, Jesus is out on the water. It says it's I. Jesus, Peter's like, I don't believe you. Tell me to walk to you on the water. He says, okay, Peter, come on. Peter gets out. He's walking on the water. And then what does the text say? When he noticed the winds of the waves, he began to sink. As long as he was focused on Jesus, just simply watch Jesus, he was fine. That didn't change that the chaos going on around him. But as soon as he noticed the chaos, then that's when he began to sink. And so for Bonhoeffer, it's like you have to stay focused on Jesus, because if you focused on the chaos, focused on protecting yourself, protecting your family, keeping your station in life, your livelihood, your position, whatever the case is, then you won't be able to do what seemed impossible, is to stand against the evil of the regime that was in place. So again, for Bonhoeffer, and this we have, kind of always have to remind ourselves of this. Not only is Miss Curtis' point, which is a very good one, that that his chronological age, but also the kind of the stark reality of what was happening with Germany, declaring war, World War II beginning, even though it wasn't called that at the time. But the real fear and the real just terror and horror that was happening, as Jewish families were getting rounded up, as people that were friends of Jews were getting rounded up, as people that didn't show fealty to the Third Reich were, being, removed from positions, and their livelihood was taken from them. All of these things are happening in real time, and Bonhoeffer now making the choice to forego the safety of the States, where he had come for a time, but felt that he needed to be with his people in Germany. Now coming back and say, okay, what can I do? How can I, inform and train these pastors, which he's doing in his I think about the underground seminary, to really fight the good fight in a way that's going to matter and really possibly have an ability to turn the tide. Um, so yeah, so you kind of have to keep that in mind. That's the context in which he's writing, because then you can kind of see, okay, how he can say these things with such certainty, how he can say, as Will was saying at the bottom of 80, you know, you know, uh, it means following Christ, or the call itself will destroy the one called. So you don't answer the call, well, then you're no good and you're thrown out and to be trampled underfoot because you're not salt anymore. And so you cease to be what you were created to be. And if you're not going to be what you're created to be, then the call that you foregone or shunned or went away from now is the cause of your demise. Um, Harsh, true. But when we step back and see kind of what he was looking at in society at the time, we can understand it. Do we agree with it? Man, probably not. There are a number of theologians before him and after him that wouldn't agree. But within the context of that particular cultural and historic moment, this is how he was writing. This is what he felt he needed to be saying in ways that were stark, but that would really drive home the point for these young seminarians that this is why why we're called. This is not a joke. It's not a practice. This is the real deal. And if you are going to, and again, for his intended audience, his original audience, if you are going to be true to the call of the gospel that you are following, training to be a preacher, training to be a pastor, then this is how you must operate in the world, vis-a-vis the evil that we're seeing in the Nazi regime. Um, and so, you'll be, the earth is supposed to be saved by the community. So this, he says this in a in a couple sentences before what I just read. But the community that has stopped being what it is, will be hopelessly lost. So Jesus is saying you are salt. You are the community of the crucified. You are the disciples because you have answered Jesus' call. Jesus said, blessed are you, blessed, blessed. You are salt. But if this community ceases, to be that which it is, which Jesus has already proclaimed, you are salt, then you're hopelessly lost. And then again, for Bonhoeffer, will good on you, as Jesus says. And so, there's also a little bit of a shock value here, a little bit of a, well, if you're going to do this, you got to do it all the way, because if you don't, you're in trouble. Kind of a little bit of an edge there to maybe shake the young men up that were training to be pastors, but nonetheless, a real, very stark choice of, if you're going to follow this, if you're going to, you have to do it. You can't do it in half measures. You can't try to keep one foot in the world and then one foot following Jesus. Everything, absolutely everything that you see, do, feel, say, experience is mediated through Christ. And the minute that you let go of that, shun that, forget about it, then you're lost. Um, and so it's kind of like, you're standing on the cliff's edge, and the supportive, stabilizing piece is being focused on Christ. And if you get off of that, if you start thinking about other things, if you start worrying about, well, what is this going to mean for my career? What does it mean for my livelihood? What you think about all these things, then you're going to teeter and plunge right off of that cliff into the abyss. So Bonhoeffer wants to make really, really very clear that Jesus proclaims these things because you have answered the call, and you have to stay true to it, and that means focusing on Jesus completely. Um, okay, so we've got about 10 minutes. So um, so he switches now to the imagery of light. And likewise, that you are the salt. You're not that you should be salt. You are the salt, not that you have the salt. Same way with light. You don't have the light, but you actually are light. You are light. Um, you shouldn't become the light of the world. You are the light of the world by virtue of you answering this call. It's not that you should be or are becoming, you are. You're already it. Because it's not about you earning it or learning about it. It's you are salt, you are light, because of the call of Jesus. The call is what makes the call puts out the possibility, and then your response, living into it, makes it so. Um, and they've already been made into light, in discipleship. And light is not something that's given to you for an example, uh, for given to you as, for example, your preaching, but you yourselves are it. You are light. It's not a reward, for doing a good job. It's the reality of who you are when you step into this discipleship, when you forego everything, for the sake of Jesus. Um, and then because you are the light, you can't stay hidden. You're not you can't. Um it's unconscionable, really. Not impossible, because people, try hiding in a bushel, but being light, you can't be hid. You're like a city on a hill. And a city on a hill, its light can be seen for miles around. And Bonhoeffer goes and say that it doesn't matter whether it's a thriving city, a castle, a fortress, or something that's crumbling. People still are able to see that city on the hill, still able to see that light. And so, no matter what condition you're in, as long as you have committed to following Jesus, you are that light, and that light can be seen from all around. Um, and you really can't stay hidden. You could try to hide, but again, trying to hide is foregoing following Jesus, and therefore, a betrayal of and a loss of that call. Um, you know, that the only decision now for the followers of Jesus, um, is that decision is the decision they've already made to follow. And they have to be what they are, or they're not following Jesus. So to an extent, and this has been preached and taught over the years, but saying that you are less than is a negation of the truth of who God created you to be. So if God says you're beloved, and when you say, "Oh, I'm not lovable because I'm da da da," da," that's speaking against what God has already said. When Jesus says you're blessed, oh, well, no, I'm not. I would be blessed if I had da 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 da. Well, that's a negation of the truth that Jesus has said of you, has spoken about you. And so we have to be careful, that when we purport to be following Jesus, that we own who we are. We are salt, we are light. That's the truth. We didn't take it on. We're not bragging about ourselves. This is what Jesus has said. And sometimes we get, and Bonhoeffer talks about it. We might not really get it fully into it, but letting your light so shine is not bragging. Hiding and saying, "Oh, well, no, I don't do anything. That's not me." That in, at least in Bonhoeffer's word, I think to a certain extent it bears out in what Jesus says too, that you are salt, you are light. This is who you are. And so you must be who you are, or again, as Bonhoeffer says, you're not following Jesus. If you're not willing to stand up and claim the fact that Jesus has already told you who you are, that you are salt, that you are light, that you're a city, that is on a hill that can't be hidden. If you're not going to own that and realize it and proclaim it, then you're really not following Jesus, because Jesus has declared that that's what you already are. And so again, it's not bragging, it's not, being prideful. It's just simply living into what is the truth of who you are, and letting that come from Jesus, not, proclaiming that you are this salt and light in and of yourself, but realizing that truth has been conferred on you as you have been called that, made that through Jesus. And so if that is the clear understanding, the clear explanation, um, then owning that you're following Jesus and you're bearing witness to what God has already done and what Jesus has said about you, or about the community of disciples. Okay, so we're gonna have to stop there. So we'll be on page 81 when we gather next week. At the beginning of that last paragraph on 81, to flee into invisibility is to deny the call. And there's some good information about that, that we'll discuss as we go through this portion called the visible church community to the righteousness of Christ and beyond on next week. All of the righteousness of Christ will take us a little bit. Okay, so thank you all for your time, your attention, for your presence. We look forward to continuing our discussion on next Wednesday. Compline will begin in about 4 minutes, give or take. So those that are here for Compline, welcome. And we'll look forward to being together at other points in time through our discussions here on Zoom, and through YouTube, Facebook, and also in person, even in those informal meetings as we are going about our daily round through the highways and byways, the streets of Brooklyn. So blessings to all. Have a good night. Do stay safe and well, and we'll look forward to being together whenever and however the Spirit allows. Take good care.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Indeed.